I met Zainab on a July afternoon while the heat rose in thick waves over the hood of our 15-passenger van. My coworker and I were picking up her youngest brother at their school to bring him to our summer program. She weighed probably 50 pounds, fifth grade. A white head covering hid her hair and framed her dark eyes. Her family had been in the U.S. for a few weeks. They came straight from Baghdad, where her father had assisted the U.S. military during the war. Zainab had something important to tell me. She rattled on in Arabic, struggling to comprehend that I had no ability to understand a word she said. On occasion, she would stomp her foot and stare around the parking lot in defeated silence. Then she'd dive in again with hand motions and sound effects, 1 or 2 words in English for every 30 words in Arabic. I strained and listened and watched to no avail. Pencil, chicken, homeworks, go, something. I shrugged my shoulders at her, my palms facing the summer sky. I tried calling a translator, but he didn't answer. Eventually, Zainab threw her exhausted hands up into the air in a gesture of futility, as if to say, "This useless adult," and walked away, shaking her head, muttering Lord knows what in Arabic. Her drama and her fire cracked me up. I think back to that first encounter during a time when the whole country is gravely concerned with one question. Who are the Muslim refugees entering the United States? For public officials and citizens, and especially the church in America, this is a pressing question. This month, after all, 2 of those refugees, young single Iraqi men, were arrested for supporting ISIS, one in California, one in Texas. One of the terrorists in the November 13th Paris attacks was allegedly a Syrian who came to Europe with other refugees and asylum seekers. These facts work in tandem with the shootings in San Bernardino and other acts of violence carried out by radicalized Muslims who were born in the U.S. or who came as immigrants to create a general sense of suspicion and fear. Our political leaders have seized on that anxiety to build their platforms as presidential candidates for 2016. And all this is centered on that question. Who are the Muslim refugees entering the United States? The fact that I have worked at a refugee resettlement agency for nearly 10 years does not make me an expert on that question or on the host of related concerns surrounding how our country should respond. Most of my work has been practical direct service. I cannot speak with authority on the details of the security process or the inner workings of the transnational resettlement machine. But the work I've done, especially the work with the kids, has given me a rare glimpse into an issue that all of us are being forced to take positions on. My point is not to say we should or should not suspend Syrian and Iraqi refugees from entering the U.S. My point is to offer a clearer image of what, or should I say who, hangs in the balance when we discuss this issue. The fact is that most times we see a Muslim person on the news, it's because that person is a criminal. This does not mean that Muslims are violent. It means that violent Muslims make the news. The vast majority who are simply going about their lives do not receive such attention. So who are the Muslim refugees entering the United States? Well, that little fireball, Zainab, she was one of them. I'd like to tell you about a few others. Omar was her brother. The spark that Zainab displayed the day we first met flowed strong in him, too. He would throw a massive tantrum, but in the midst of it turn and give you this angel grin like the whole thing was some kind of inside joke. Once the family had been here several months and Omar had developed a base vocabulary in English, he sang the praises of the local grocery store's frozen food section in an especially memorable way. Walking past the store, he pointed to it, eyes wide and excited, and said to my coworker, Melissa, you know Aldi? Aldi is good. Big pizza, little money." Once when I visited their home, the whole family told me about their life in Baghdad. They lived in a compound of sorts with extended family and often had animals roaming about, goats and chickens and such. Something in the conversation stirred Omar's memory of a mean black goat that used to chase the kids around. He was compelled to tell me in great detail about this goat, how it would look at you with its scary black eye, and you would want to run, but you knew if you did, it was going to chase you. Abdullah and his two sisters, Dalia and Tesneem, were sharp kids. The first summer that Abdullah, the youngest, who was a first grader at the time, joined our program, he was so quiet and shy we hardly knew if he was there or not. He wrote in slow, meticulous letters. His sisters were sweet and well-mannered, though when the oldest one, Dalia, got into middle school and seemed to begin to find her place in her diverse, urban American culture, her fiery side started to surface. In particular, the attitude flared up one summer when an Assyrian boy named Daniel heckled her daily in true adolescent form, harmless, relentless. They were Syrian Muslims. Their father was a torture survivor and had arrived in Chicago a few months before his family to start therapy. Their home was heavy and sad. The kids walked nowhere in the neighborhood without one of their parents. Another famous set of three siblings were Saeed, Fatima, and Abdi Razim. They were Muslims from Somalia who came to the U.S. with their mother and aunt. I never learned what happened to their father. Saeed was in 4th grade when they came, his sister a couple years older. Like many of the kids, we watched them grow over the course of a few years from being timid, fearful, hardly speaking a word of English, struggling hopelessly with grade-level homework, to becoming comfortable, feeling a sense of social grounding, having friends, absorbing information rapidly, even helping guide and befriend the new refugee kids who were just arriving. My favorite memory of Abdi Razim took place one day at our after-school program. He was a big, squirrely kindergartner who struggled with his homework and therefore made constant requests unrelated to whatever he was supposed to be doing at a given moment. One day he finished all his homework early. He pleaded with me to let him go join a couple of the other boys out in the hallway kicking a soccer ball with their volunteer. "Please, Mr. Jake," he implored, his fingers interwoven, hands held up to me like some kind of prisoner begging for mercy. Upon my consent, he shouted in victory, "Yes!" and turned to sprint out the door, but in turning he tripped himself, plummeted to the floor without a chance to extend his arms to break his fall, and planted his face squarely against the baseboard of the wall with a thud that still resounds in my memory to this day. Shock and tears replaced his joy, but a few minutes later he was happily engaged in a game of Uno with a little Nepali girl named Bipasha. So who are the Muslim refugees entering the United States? Our leaders have a lot to say about this. We've heard them say things like, "We don't even know who these people are." We've heard them say that Europe is being overrun by young Muslim men, insinuating that the same thing will happen here if we are not careful. Governors have told the president that Muslim refugees carry the threat of unacceptable peril to the people of their state. Even if there's a sliver of truth in each of these statements and so many others like them, their combined effect creates a gross misrepresentation. Not just a misrepresentation of the kids I just told you about, but a misrepresentation of the situation at large. According to a senior official at the State Department, half of the Syrian refugees who've come to the U.S. so far are children. That's about 600 kids, just like the ones I described to you. In terms of the pool of Syrian refugees in the Middle East who will be considered for resettlement in the coming year, 40% of those registered in Lebanon, Jordan, Egypt, and Iraq are kids. That's about 1.8 million children. The U.S. currently plans to welcome 10,000 Syrian refugees from primarily the Middle East this fiscal year. So if that 40% stays consistent, we can expect a population resettled here to include 4,000 children. These numbers don't count Iraqi refugees. My point is not to say we should or shouldn't suspend Syrian and Iraqi refugees from entering the U.S. My point is to offer a clearer image of who hangs in the balance. It is true that implementing such a measure may keep another ISIS sympathizer outside of the peaceful place that God has given us to live. But that enhanced sense of security for ourselves and for our children comes with a price. And part of who will pay that price is at least a few thousand vulnerable kids. When I watch the news and I see images of people in the camps or the families wandering across Europe or those fleeing violence within their home country, I cannot look at the children without thinking of the kids I've gotten to know over the years, without remembering their vibrant humor, their innocence, their determination, their mischief. If one piece of policy had been different, or if their resettlement interview had gone askew, or if one country had decided to close its borders or suspend its resettlement program, then it could have been Zainab, looking at me through my TV from across the world. It could have been Abdi Razim waiting without hope in some refugee camp. It could have been Abdullah, or Dalia, or Tesneem, laying dead on a beach in Turkey. So please, when you see the faces of violent murderers on the news, and the fear of Islamic terrorism pierces you, picture alongside them the faces of children like the ones I just described, and calculate your stance on Muslim refugees with carefulness and prayer, firstly, as a follower of Jesus, and secondly, as an American. Who are the Muslim refugees entering the U.S.? I pray for our leaders, for our church leaders, for you, and for myself, that the Lord will bring us clarity in how we answer that question. I pray that love will triumph over fear, good over evil, and truth over lies.